What happens is if people go into a trial believing the firepower on the prosecution is so strong, I mean, let's say on a scale of 1 to 100, it's a 95 that it's so strong, but it goes down to an 88.
When a global superstar agrees to testify in a federal trial, it isn't just news, it's a seismic shift. The courtroom isn't just a place for justice anymore, it becomes a stage where reputations, empires, and legacies hang in the balance. And in one of the most unexpected twists the music industry has seen in years, Justin Bieber, yes, that Justin Bieber has stepped directly into the legal firestorm swirling around Sean Diddy Combs. At first glance, it feels surreal. A pop icon who skyrocketed to fame with swooping hair and teenage anthems now finds himself under oath.
That helps the defense because everybody goes in thinking, wow, they're going to prove this, and they're going to prove this, and they're going to prove this, and all of a sudden, none of it's there. I think that actually helps the defense.
Recounting shadowy parties, secretive rules, and chilling logistics behind some of entertainment's most exclusive gatherings. But what's even more shocking, he's not the one on trial. Diddy, once hailed as the architect of modern hip-hop royalty, now faces federal trafficking and racketeering charges that threaten not only his career, but the mythos he's built over decades. Accused of using his fame and power to manipulate, exploit, and control.
Well, Bill and Sade, accepting a plea agreement would mean that Sean Combs would have to admit to trafficking and force. And today he made it very clear that was not going to happen.
Diddy is rejecting plea deals, refusing to back down, and preparing to fight the system head on. He claims innocence. The prosecutors claim conspiracy. The jury will decide. But then, Bieber walks in. This isn't a typical celebrity cameo. He isn't promoting an album, doing a press tour, or standing by a friend.
Diddy maintained all along these encounters involved consenting adults and plans to take his chances that a jury agrees.
He's entering a federal courtroom as a witness for the prosecution. And that changes everything. Why now? What did he see? And what does it mean when one of music's most pristine images aligns himself with the forces trying to bring down one of its most powerful moguls? What happens next could redefine not just the trial, but the very way we view fame, power, and the price of silence in the entertainment industry. But that was just the beginning. For years, Sean Diddy Combs stood untouchable, a hip-hop visionary, fashion icon, business tycoon. He built an empire that seemed immune to collapse. He danced across stages, graced magazine covers, and turned every controversy into another branding opportunity.
Music mogul Sean Diddy Combs back behind bars, a magistrate judge denying him bail, saying that there were no conditions that she could conceive of that would make her confident that he would appear again for other court appearances. The judge saying, my concern is this is a crime that happens behind closed doors.
But beneath the luxury jets and champagne-soaked events, something darker was brewing, and when it finally erupted, it didn't come as a media scandal, it came as a federal indictment. The charges were staggering: human trafficking, racketeering, obstruction, not whispered allegations or gossip blog fodder. Formal accusations backed by months of surveillance, digital forensics, and sworn testimonies. Prosecutors painted a chilling picture: a powerful man orchestrating a secretive web of control, coercion, and manipulation behind velvet ropes and private gates.
Mr. Combs feels A, he's innocent, which is why he's not going to plead guilty. B, he's going to be truthful about this case because he wants to portray that to the people who have loved him his whole life. And I think he also feels an obligation to people in general.
Exclusive parties with no phones allowed, non-disclosure agreements at the door, security tighter than a presidential convoy, and according to investigators, it was all by design. Diddy's legal team immediately struck back. They called the allegations baseless. They framed the investigation as an overreach, a witch hunt targeting a successful black entrepreneur. And when federal prosecutors offered a plea deal that could have spared him years in prison, Diddy made his position clear: no deal.
The last hearing before Sean Combs' trial starts, when he walked into federal court today, he appeared to be looking for his family. They've pretty much been at all of the hearings that I've been to, but there was no presence of his sons or his mother or his sister who had previously been at those hearings.
He wasn't going to admit guilt, not even to save himself. That decision stunned legal experts, because refusing a plea deal isn't just bold, it's dangerous, especially when the government claims it has a mountain of evidence waiting to be unpacked in court. But Diddy didn't flinch. He showed up in court wearing baggy jail clothes, but spoke with confidence. He claimed all encounters were consensual, that nothing illegal ever happened.
maybe it's black people, maybe it's white people, maybe it's anybody who's ever felt aggrieved and targeted by the government. He feels an obligation to those people to say, you know what, maybe I can break the model.
That he was ready to stand trial. Behind the scenes, prosecutors were confident but cautious. They knew the weight of going after a figure like Diddy. Public opinion can be unpredictable, and jurors often enter high-profile trials carrying their own biases. So they needed more than documents and timelines. They needed witnesses who could translate secretive policies into human experiences. And then came a name no one expected, Justin Bieber. Just 4 days before the trial was set to begin, prosecutors confirmed that Bieber would testify.
You know, maybe I can show the world that a black man can win, you know, in federal court. And I think he probably is the only person I know of who might be able to actually accomplish that.
Not as a victim, not as an accuser, but as a first-hand observer, a pop star who'd been inside those private events, who'd seen how they were run, and who was willing to talk. His name was already on guest lists. His face appeared in seized footage, and his story, prosecutors believed, could connect the dots in a way no spreadsheet ever could. The courtroom had already become a battleground, but with Bieber stepping in, it became something else entirely, a war between 2 generations of fame, between hip-hop's old guard and pop's reformed prodigy, and the stakes, nothing less than freedom, legacy, and truth. But Bieber's appearance wasn't just surprising, it was strategic. The moment the news broke, it sent shockwaves through both the music world and the legal community. Justin Bieber would testify in the federal case against Sean Diddy Combs.
At trial, Combs will ditch the jail garb and wear ordinary clothes. As his lawyers argue, the evidence shows consenting adults being intimate in their own way.
For many, it didn't compute. Bieber, the same kid discovered on YouTube, the same man who once sang love ballads on arena stages and spoke openly about faith and redemption, was now stepping into a courtroom, not as a defendant, but as a key witness for the prosecution. It wasn't just unexpected, it was unprecedented. Bieber had, for years, carefully rebuilt his public image from reckless teen idol to introspective adult artist. He spoke about mental health, found peace in religion, and largely avoided the chaos that consumed others in his orbit. So when his name appeared on early witness rosters linked to private events hosted by Combs, most fans assumed it was a mistake or overreach, but it wasn't. Multiple sources confirmed that Bieber had already met privately with prosecutors behind closed doors. These weren't casual conversations, they were formal pre-testimony sessions where every word was scrutinized. What he'd seen, where he'd been, who was in the room, and how everything worked, from invite to exit. What made this moment even more powerful was Bieber's voluntary cooperation. According to court documents, he wasn't subpoenaed.
Do you still think that because there is this public perception that there are celebrity tapes involved in this case?
He came forward after learning his name had surfaced in digital guest logs seized from Diddy's staff. And while he didn't claim to be a victim himself, his decision to cooperate changed the entire tone of the trial. Prosecutors saw it as a tactical advantage. Bieber wasn't a disgruntled former employee. He wasn't someone chasing a payout or revenge. He had no financial axe to grind with Combs. That made him a clean witness, someone the jury could view as credible, neutral, and trustworthy. His brand, after all, wasn't built on lawsuits or scandal. It was built on redemption, on transparency, on truth. But the cultural ripple was even larger. News outlets lit up with headlines. Social media split in two. Some praised Bieber's courage and civic responsibility. Others accused him of betrayal, of turning on an industry figure who had once welcomed him into the fold. Memes, think pieces, and fan theories exploded online. Had he been pressured? Was he trying to clear his own name?
Federal trafficking, racketeering, and charges beginning Monday morning.
Major developments tonight involving the case against Sean Diddy Combs, what he decided in court today, and what this now means, the move coming just 4 days before his trial is set to begin. Here's Aaron Katursky.
Or was this about something bigger, maybe a generational shift in how fame and accountability intersect? For Combs' legal team, it was a problem that couldn't be ignored. They knew that a figure like Bieber on the witness stand wouldn't just draw attention, it would shape public opinion. The courtroom would be packed, cameras would wait outside, and every word Bieber said would be dissected by legal analysts and gossip bloggers alike. They also knew that Bieber's style, his calm demeanor, his spiritual references, his refusal to indulge in drama would land differently with jurors. He wasn't just another celebrity, he was the kind of star that middle America had grown to trust again. The kind that moms, dads, and even grandparents might believe over the polished arguments of high-priced defense attorneys. And that's what made his presence so powerful. Because when Bieber agreed to speak, it wasn't just a legal move, it was a message. That silence wasn't an option, that past associations wouldn't stop him from standing up, and that maybe, just maybe, the old rules of loyalty and secrecy in the entertainment world were starting to crack. But what exactly did Bieber witness, and why did it matter so much?
Do you still think that there are minors involved in this case?
I'm certain no.
Justin Bieber didn't walk into the courtroom to tell a sob story. He wasn't there to make headlines or steal the spotlight. He was there because he had seen things, and what he saw, prosecutors argued, filled crucial gaps in a case built around secrecy, control, and high-powered influence that operated behind closed doors. During his pretrial sessions with government attorneys, Bieber described attending a series of private gatherings, hosted or coordinated by individuals connected to Sean Combs. These weren't your typical Hollywood after-parties. They were cloaked in exclusivity, wrapped in silence, and structured in a way that left little room for spontaneity. The kind of parties where phones were surrendered at the door, where NDAs weren't optional, and where everyone attending knew what happened inside stayed inside. Bieber recalled that some events were framed as listening sessions or networking experiences, usually held in secluded mansions or luxury penthouses. But the mood shifted the moment you walked in. There were security guards at every exit.
Okay.
And again, when you say this case, we're talking the criminal case.
The criminal case.
In the
correct.
criminal,
I know that.
In the criminal case,
in
the criminal case,
right.
no.
Drivers were pre-arranged, guests were shuttled in small groups to prevent any chance of location leaks. You didn't just attend these gatherings, you were processed into them. He didn't claim to witness criminal acts directly, but he did describe an environment that prosecutors said matched the testimonies of other, more central witnesses. A place where access was tightly controlled, where women and men were separated into certain rooms, where it felt like every detail was choreographed. Even playlists were preset. Lighting was dimmed, cameras were blocked, and private conversations happened in hushed tones behind closed doors. To the prosecution, Bieber's statements weren't about spectacle, they were about structure. His account showed how these events weren't random parties thrown by a carefree mogul, but rather orchestrated environments with layers of protection and silence.
Sean Combs makes it official. He's rejecting the government's offer to plead guilty and spare himself the possibility of a prolonged term in prison.
And that was the prosecution's entire theory, that what looked like lavish social scenes were actually covers for something far more calculated. What made Bieber's account especially potent was his neutrality. He had no axe to grind. He wasn't part of Bad Boy Records. He never sued Combs. He didn't need attention. He already had it. That clean slate made his recollection harder to dismiss. Defense lawyers quickly saw the danger. They couldn't accuse Bieber of lying without risking backlash, and they knew attacking him too aggressively could make them look like bullies. Instead, their strategy was more subtle, minimize, suggest that Bieber's experience was an outlier, that his attendance at one or two events didn't reflect the full scope, that these were common protocols for A-list gatherings across the industry. But prosecutors had anticipated that argument.
When asked if he turned down the offer, Combs answered, "Yes, I do, Your Honor," as he stood in a baggy beige jail uniform. Terms were not disclosed, but prosecutors did say a plea could result in a shorter sentence for Combs than if he's convicted.
That's why they focused Bieber's testimony not on what was shocking, but what was consistent. They didn't need him to provide a smoking gun. They needed him to confirm the layout, the guest list logic, the strict policies that other witnesses, those who claimed abuse, had described in painful detail. In that courtroom, Bieber's presence wasn't about being a star. It was about being a witness to a system that prosecutors said had been used to protect, isolate, and control. He remembered which events required rideshare pickups instead of personal arrivals. He recalled how security would check IDs against invite-only apps, how phone cameras were physically disabled, and how even casual photos were strictly off limits. He could describe the scent of the cologne diffused through the air vents. That kind of detail, the kind you don't fake, landed like a hammer. And as jurors listened to him walk through each moment,
isn't that, to my mind, that's one of the bigger hurdles in selecting a jury this coming week, is that there is, at least anecdotally, when I talk to people,
a clearer picture began to form, not of one wild night or a misunderstanding, but of a repeated, structured playbook. One designed allegedly to give Diddy full control while leaving almost no trace. And if that structure could be proven, Diddy's defense might already be cracking. In every high-profile trial, the courtroom isn't just a place of facts, it's a battlefield of perception. And in the case of Sean Combs versus the federal government, every narrative twist, every word spoken, and every silent glance carries weight. Because in the absence of clear-cut evidence, jurors don't just look at the law, they look at the people, and both sides knew exactly what they were up against. For the prosecution, the goal was clear: show that Diddy wasn't just a charismatic entrepreneur, but the architect of a hidden system, a pattern of behavior hidden behind fame, power, and billion-dollar branding. Bieber's testimony added fuel to that fire. His quiet, controlled account wasn't sensational, it was strategic. He didn't accuse, he confirmed. He described settings, rules, atmospheres, and in doing so, he made the prosecutor's theory feel more tangible, more grounded, more real.
They have that opinion, strongly held opinion, that there's celebrity tapes, that they've kind of conflated Epstein, and you mentioned Ghislaine Maxwell, and
They painted Diddy as a man who didn't need to shout commands. He built environments that obeyed him automatically. Environments where staff were trained to guide, restrict, and surveil. Where silence wasn't just encouraged, it was expected. And when Bieber calmly described those same conditions, it wasn't just corroboration, it was amplification. Suddenly, the government's narrative had a face jurors recognized. A witness who looked nothing like a whistleblower, but who echoed everything they'd already heard. But the defense had a story of its own. They weren't just fighting the charges, they were fighting the imagery. Their message was simple: fame makes you a target. Diddy, they argued, was a black mogul who had built something powerful in an industry that never wanted him to win. Now, that empire made him vulnerable to rumors, resentment, and weaponized accusations. To counter Bieber's quiet gravity, they leaned into logic. They showed pictures of high-end events hosted by tech billionaires, fashion houses, and royalty, each with the same strict rules: no phones, security guards, NDAs. Is privacy now a crime? One attorney asked the jury, or is it just something powerful people use to survive the spotlight? They acknowledged that Bieber told the truth as he saw it, but they urged jurors not to confuse exclusivity with exploitation. Just because something feels controlled doesn't mean it's criminal, and just because Bieber had a strong memory of luxury parties didn't mean those events were fronts for conspiracy. They also pushed back on the emotional undertones. Bieber may be beloved, they said, but his perception was limited. He wasn't behind the scenes, the defense argued. He didn't see how things were set up. He wasn't privy to planning conversations. He came in, observed a few things, and left. That doesn't make him a villain or a hero. It just makes him a guest. And that was the line the defense walked, respecting Bieber's presence while undermining his weight, because they knew they couldn't afford to attack him directly. Doing so would backfire. Instead, they aimed to reframe him as incidental, as noise, not signal. Still, they couldn't ignore how powerfully Bieber's image played into the prosecution's hand. Here was a global icon, a chart-topping millionaire with nothing to gain and everything to lose, standing beside the government. Why would he do that unless he believed something had gone terribly wrong? The trial, once seen as Diddy versus the state, had now become a battle of what to believe. On one side, allegations of control, coercion, and manipulation. On the other, a defense built on dignity, reputation, and doubt. And caught in the middle, a jury forced to untangle the truth from the theater. But the trial wasn't just about courtroom tactics, it was about tension, and things were about to get personal. Courtrooms may look calm on the surface, oak panels, measured tones, rehearsed decorum, but behind every pause and protocol, pressure simmers like a live wire. And in the trial of Sean Combs, that pressure was palpable, because this wasn't just a legal proceeding, it was a spectacle. Every look, every movement, every word carried consequences that rippled far beyond the walls of the courthouse. Inside, the air felt thicker than usual. Reporters lined every bench, security stood stiff at the back, spectators leaned in at every whispered sidebar, and when Justin Bieber entered to testify, the tension jumped a full octave. Cameras weren't allowed inside, but you could feel the invisible lens of global attention hovering over the room. Bieber's entrance was subdued. No sunglasses, no swagger, just a muted suit, a steady gait, and a quiet, deliberate energy. He didn't look like a pop star. He looked like someone carrying the weight of something serious. His testimony wasn't animated, but it was sharp. He answered precisely. He didn't guess. He didn't speculate. He paused before each response, taking the kind of measured breath that shows you've been prepped for every possible trap. The prosecution moved with care. They didn't want drama, they wanted clarity. They had rehearsed this. From the exact phrasing of their questions to the order of topics, it was a choreography of control. They wanted jurors to see a timeline, a pattern, a witness who wasn't there for vengeance but for truth. And it worked until the defense stepped up. That's when the mood in the room shifted. Diddy's lawyers knew they couldn't afford to attack Bieber directly, but they could turn up the psychological pressure. Their questions were respectful but surgical. They pushed on memory, on frequency. Are you sure it was that day? Could it have been another host? Did you speak to anyone about what you saw that night? Slowly, the defense began to chip away, not at Bieber's honesty, but at the certainty of his narrative. Their goal wasn't to discredit him, it was to destabilize him. Not enough to create a scandal, just enough to plant a seed of doubt in the jury's mind. Behind the scenes, the stakes were just as intense. Sources close to the case described sleepless nights, strategy sessions that ran until dawn, and even mental health support arranged for Bieber ahead of his testimony. Because even for someone who's performed in front of millions, a courtroom is a different kind of stage, one where every word can be twisted and every misstep could have legal consequences. Diddy, meanwhile, watched silently. No outbursts, no reactions, just a cold, focused stare from the defense table. His lawyers whispered between themselves, occasionally passing notes, eyes locked on the jury's response to every beat of testimony. And through it all, the jury sat still. No nodding, no furrowed brows, just passive faces taking in a collision of two worlds, hip-hop royalty and pop redemption, wrapped inside a federal case. At times, the tension broke, but only briefly. A cough from the gallery, a judge's reminder to rephrase, but the weight always returned, because everyone knew this wasn't just about Bieber's words, it was about how he said them. Would jurors believe his quiet confidence, or would they lean toward the defense's carefully crafted reasonable doubt? The stress inside that courtroom wasn't just legal, it was emotional, and it was building with every hour, but outside those walls, a different kind of storm was brewing, one that threatened the careers, reputations, and brands of everyone involved. For the public, a courtroom trial can feel like a one-time event, a news cycle, a headline that flashes, trends, and disappears. But for the people inside that courtroom, for Diddy, for Bieber, what happens there echoes for years, because the stakes in this case reach far beyond a verdict. They touch on everything these two icons have ever created, their art, their money, their legacies. For Sean Combs, the risk is monumental. If convicted, he doesn't just face prison time, he faces the unraveling of an empire. His image, once synonymous with ambition and resilience, could be permanently stained. Every brand attached to him, liquor labels, clothing lines, streaming platforms, business ventures, would be forced to reconsider their partnerships. Sponsors don't wait for sentencing. They react to public perception. Some already have. Quiet distancing, brand photos cropped tighter, endorsement language rewritten. In PR circles, it's called strategic de-escalation. It doesn't scream abandonment, it whispers it. But make no mistake, if the trial tips further against him, the whispers will become policy. Licensing deals will dissolve. Catalogs could get pulled from major platforms. And an entire generation of fans might see him not as the mogul who built Bad Boy, but the man who let it all fall apart. Combs isn't just fighting for his freedom, he's fighting for control of his story. On the other side, Justin Bieber's risk is different, but just as real. By testifying, he aligned himself with federal prosecutors against one of the most influential figures in music. That decision, no matter how principled, comes with fallout. In an industry built on loyalty and silent alliances, stepping into the spotlight as a witness can close doors, quietly but permanently. Will producers hesitate to call? Will artists distance themselves to avoid being caught in the wake? Some already have. Behind closed doors, conversations are happening. Was this smart? Is he next? Should we wait before working with him again? But Bieber didn't just make this choice lightly. According to those close to him, he weighed the personal risk against a promise he made long ago to be honest about what he'd seen, to stop playing along with broken systems, and to use his platform for something bigger than sales or image. And in doing so, he's reshaping what pop star responsibility looks like. He isn't shouting for attention, he's stepping into uncomfortable spaces, not as a victim, not as an accuser, but as a witness. And that subtle shift in role could mark a defining moment in how the entertainment world handles accountability. Still, the pressure is enormous. Every word he said under oath is being picked apart by lawyers, critics, and fans alike. Every brand attached to his name is running scenario plans. What if fans turn? What if headlines spin? What if the trial drags on for months? Streaming platforms are watching metrics like hawks, Spotify playlists, YouTube comment sections, TikTok sound trends. Because in today's entertainment economy, even the perception of alignment, one way or the other, can swing millions in revenue. And yet, for both artists, this isn't just about risk, it's about identity. Diddy, the self-made mogul, determined to prove that a powerful black man can beat the system. Bieber, the pop prodigy turned public soul searcher, trying to show that silence doesn't protect, it corrupts. They're not just playing defense anymore, they're making moves that will shape how their names are remembered, by fans, by history, by the very industries they help define. But there's one final chapter still to unfold, because this trial is far from over. No matter what the jury decides, this trial has already made history. Not because of the verdict, not yet, but because of what it revealed. Because beneath the testimony, the media chaos, the branding fallout, and legal jargon, something more fundamental was exposed. The fragile line between power and protection in the entertainment industry. This wasn't just about Sean Diddy Combs facing charges. It was about an entire system of access, silence, and curated appearances. It was about how fame becomes armor, and sometimes a weapon. And when Justin Bieber took the stand, that armor cracked. Because here's the truth, Bieber didn't have to testify. He wasn't dragged in. He wasn't subpoenaed under protest. He chose to step into the storm. And that choice, quiet, strategic, dangerous, sent a signal louder than any album drop or Instagram confession ever could. It said, "This time I won't look away." But that doesn't mean it was easy, or clean, or free from consequences. In the days following his testimony, narratives split like fault lines. Some called him brave, others called him a traitor, some praised the transparency, others warned of opportunism. And that divide between loyalty and truth, between the old rules of protecting the inner circle and a new culture of speaking out, is exactly why this case matters more than just legally. Because it's not just about who's guilty or innocent, it's about who gets to speak and who gets believed. For decades, the music industry has functioned like a fortress. Hierarchies built on influence, parties behind closed doors, non-disclosure agreements masquerading as protection. But the cracks are widening. The old gatekeepers are being questioned, and the new generation, led by figures like Bieber, is refusing to stay silent just to stay safe. Diddy still claims innocence. His lawyers insist the case is built on exaggeration and innuendo, and maybe in the end, the jury will agree. Maybe they'll say there's not enough, that the lines are too blurry, that the system, while uncomfortable, isn't illegal. And if that happens, Combs walks free, but the questions won't disappear. Because this trial isn't just a legal reckoning, it's a cultural one. It's about what we normalize when the music is loud, the money's flowing, and everyone's smiling for the cameras. It's about the machinery behind fame, the unspoken rules, the untouchables who thought they were immune to scrutiny. And most of all, it's about what happens when someone finally breaks that silence. Whether you believe Bieber is a hero, a strategic witness, or just a man trying to do the right thing, you can't ignore what his testimony did. It forced a conversation, it pulled back the curtain, and it reminded everyone watching that behind the glitz, there are systems, patterns, and consequences. So yes, this trial will end, the jury will speak, the headlines will shift, but what it means, that story is just beginning.